Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Centimetre Perfect AFL podcast. We have made it through 3 rounds of the AFL season. 3 3/4, though, if you count opening round. And guess what now, Liam? That joke of 3/4 has marched all the way through the end of the season, including Hogwarts round, when we get to platform 9 3/4 of the year. We have made it through a month of football. Can you believe that? That's so much football. It's only the 1st of April.
Well, Jesse, that caught me out today, actually, because as we do every Tuesday, Monday, Tuesday, leading up into our podcast, talking about the news that's coming on, and I got done a few times today. Today is April 1st, the day of recording. I got done a few times by the old April Fools today. I'm not afraid to admit it, but that's okay. That's okay. I didn't even know it was April. This year's going by like a flash, but we are a month in. Some good footy, some undefeated teams, some victorious teams to talk about later on in our review, and also coming up later on, dear listener. Jesse, what do we got?
So much to talk about. So much to talk about on YouTube as well, including our Just the Tips AFL Tipping Edition. Liam, I think probably with his most objectively successful round ever against me in the home and away season. I blame Port Adelaide. Who do you blame? Well, if you watch the episode, you'll know more about that. If you watch this week's episode, you know who we're picking this week. That's on YouTube on the Centimetre Perfect AFL Podcast YouTube channel. Make sure you're following us on Instagram at CMPerfect_AFL, along with on your preferred podcasting platform. I have been asked what they are. So it's Apple, which some people listen to. It's Amazon, which I personally don't know anyone that uses Amazon. Personally, I'm sure there's a really passionate fan called Dave who tunes in on Amazon and he's like, "How dare you, Dave? I'm sorry. I'm go on YouTube. I'm actually looking directly at the camera for you right now, Dave. I'm sorry." And of course, Spotify. I'm a Spotify guy.
Yeah, I'm a Spotify guy too.
And it syncs with my Garmin too. How good is that? It syncs with my Garmin.
We love a bit of synchronicity. It's very nice. I will say this though: if you're on Apple, it has to be Apple Podcast. If you're on Apple Music, it won't come up, unfortunately. I tried with my mate. She couldn't find it. But on Apple Podcasts, you can. Fingers crossed. And if you have problems, Jesse, just default to Spotify. You'll be fine. You'll be fine.
That's not paid placement, but it really should be.
Well, I'll tell you what. Enough about that, Jesse. We have news to talk about before we get into the games.
We do.
What's our feature piece for today?
Well, we're going to start with Tasmania. And as with all exciting news stories, we're going to start with disclaimers. Now, this topic has caused quite a lot of upset in Tasmania, and it's become, I think, quite political in nature within Tasmanian state politics. So, a disclaimer off the top, this whole piece is entirely from a neutral perspective. It is reporting the facts as they are presented. Our main source here is ABC News, for those who want to go and source things. But this is entirely a neutral, I guess, as much fact-based as we can make it, while speculating wildly on whether the team's actually going to happen.
Well, I was going to say, it is neutral because, as you can all see if you're watching on YouTube, we are both repping our Freo Dockers jerseys today because we finally had a win. So we have no dog in this fight, but it's interesting to talk about. Sorry, I thought I had to bring that up as an extra disclaimer, Jesse.
That we're Fremantle fans?
Yeah, probably worth mentioning.
I was actually told by someone who listens to podcasts they wouldn't know I'm a Freo fan, or they wouldn't think I'm a Freo fan if they didn't know me. I think that's quite funny because of the amount of just poo-poo I hang on the club sometimes for all things rubbish that they throw at us, and they throw some rubbish. Anyway, Liam, Tasmania, probably should talk about them because we did promise to. So the Tasmanian Planning Commission released a report over the weekend into the planned stadium at Macquarie Point, which is a pretty significant location on the Hobart shoreline. Now, does Hobart have buildings? I heard someone ask in the back of my head. Yes, they do. I'm actually looking at a photo right now. People live there. And Liam, you're very pro-Tasmania. You've been there plenty of times. I'm sure it's nice.
Twice. And never to Hobart, but can confirm Tasmania does have buildings. It does.
How did you get to like Lonnie then, I guess?
Lonnie, yeah, I went to Lonnie.
Were all the lights on in Launceston because they went off in the game again on Saturday?
That's something we could talk about as well. They've got to sort their lights out in Lonnie. That's twice now. We'll talk about that later.
We will. Some trouble here, though, I think, for fans of the Tasmanian AFL team concept. So, in short, the report, which was released on Monday afternoon, not over the weekend, described the stadium as overbearing, disproportionate, and against local planning schemes per the ABC News website. Now, this is problematic straight away because we've seen in Tasmanian state politics or certainly in Tasmanian state society, there has been a divide in terms of should we build a stadium, should we not build a stadium and retain, I think it's called Blundstone now or something, but it's Bellerive Oval for the traditionalists amongst us, like Subiaco Oval was, or should we remain in a potentially upgrade Bellerive? Now, as I understand it, Bellerive has public transportation issues to and from the ground that do make it difficult for large amounts of fans to traverse to the game. And that's part of the considerations around Macquarie point to is how will that public transport system link in. But the big problems here, Liam, in terms of are we going to get a Tasmanian team? And that's what I want this conversation about. I don't want this to be about the politics of building a stadium. That's not what this podcast is designed for. This is about Team 19 in the AFL. The AFL are on record multiple times as saying no new stadium with a funny roof. Maybe not the funny part, but no roof.
Yeah.
No Team 19. This report objectively throws more, I guess, considerations or questions for the powers that be in Tasmania and the AFL by extension to address if they want the stadium built. So where there's a massive discrepancy according to the news article on cost. The government allegedly has said the cost would be $775 million. The panel of the Tasmanian Planning Commission have said $861 million. Straight away, that's a pretty big difference. Including other non-stadia infrastructure, so your public transportation, your connections, you're talking almost $1.2 billion. So it's significant investment, but investment comes with a cost. And, you know, I don't think it's controversial to point at the political calendar and see what time we are in now, the federal election being called. So I'm sure this will come up in some capacity, but it has been a hot topic in Tasmania. Should we build a stadium? Should we not build a stadium? But the AFL's made their position clear. No stadium, no team.
I think that might be just a little bit of posturing. I think now they've gone to the trouble of announcing the 19th team. The Tassie Devils have Ramun, their lovely mascot. They've got, 375 million followers now, members, from that massive drive, that membership drive at the start. You know, they had memberships out the wazoo. Obviously, those are much more inflated than what they will end up being once the team comes in. But methinks this might be just a little bit of business, trying to posture a little bit. I think it'd be a massive tail between the legs situation if the AFL now withdrew Tasmania as having a team on the basis of a stadium. I think a deal will get done in some capacity. Like you said, it's a political year, right? There's always going to be someone not happy, someone trying to, turn a story into something that's big. Obviously, the costs, big thing. I saw a picture of it and how it would stick out above those 3 and 4 buildings that are in Hobart. Because it's a nice city. It's an old city. It's not a built-up city like you would have in your Sydneys or Melbournes, obviously. But if that picture is something to go by, it does kind of stick out like a sore thumb. I can see why people would be upset about it. Whether or not this will affect a 19th team coming in, I have my doubts. I think the decision is made, one way or t'other. We are going to have a Tasmanian team. This deal will get across the line. I feel like we hear this all the time as well, like this posturing, and eventually everything gets across the line. That's just my opinion on it. I think, obviously, I only have an opinion. I'm not part of the whole situation, but yeah, that's my take. There's no chance. I will eat my hat if the AFL goes back on that and says they're not going to have a 19th team because of a stadium. I don't think it's going to happen, Jesse.
That's very Dan Gorringe of you.
Oh, really? Well, I actually don't own any hats, so it's a safe bet.
You own hats.
I don't.
I've seen you in a hat at least once.
No, I don't. If I'm wearing a hat, it ain't mine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'll force you to eat a relative's hat then. How does that sound? No,
that wasn't the bet. Okay. But what are your thoughts, Jesse? What are your thoughts like on that though? I feel like it's just a bit of mishmash.
We have different opinions on this because I personally feel that it'd be a bigger, I guess, posturing misstep by the AFL to say, doesn't matter, we didn't get the stadium we demanded to build, let's go there anyway. I'm still not sold on the concept of Team 19.
Okay.
And I don't think I'm going to be sold on the concept of Team 19. And I will say this. Tasmania is football heartland. I understand that. Tasmania, as a state, you can make a very valid argument that there should be representation for Tasmania in the Australian Football League. I do not disagree with that sentiment.
Sure.
However, look at the way the competition's going right now. look at the current drafting concessions with father, son, and academies, and look at the teams that once they get sucked into rebuild purgatory, they're staying there for longer. A rebuild used to be 2 or 3 years. Right now, it's looking like it's averaging 5, and that's with 18 teams.
Yep.
I don't know if the top-end talent can carry us to 19 years. I think if you went and you probably promoted, say, 40 state league players and distributed them across the competition relatively evenly, I'm sure you wouldn't notice too much of a difference.
Sure.
But I am concerned now when you talk, especially given Tasmania going to get whopping draft concessions when they come in, because when you bring a new team, you have to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I have my personal doubts that this is the best decision for the league as a whole. I understand the sentimentality, but when you've still got teams in Victoria struggling financially, you've got a team that you brought in 14 years ago that hasn't made a finals appearance yet, although we will talk about them later.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got teams in the West that have been here for 30 years and not won a premiership. You know, I get the sense that, yeah, I know. Again, the question of that I'm actually a Fremantle fan is probably valid. But in all seriousness, I look at this Team 19 concept. I remove the sentimentality, that's a fun one, of Tasmania being football heartland and being football heritage. And I don't see its viability long term, especially when it's not going to be a big team ticket sales wise or probably financially ever. Like, yes, Tassie probably should have some representation, but it's a small market. Yeah. And it's a market that really, Tassie itself, small state. You've got the state divided almost in two with Hobart and Lonnie. So it's going to make it difficult again when you're playing in Launceston. Are you going to sell out consistently? You know, we saw some of the ticket prices last year being charged at Launceston games for neutral clubs. If they try that on, is that going to be successful to get a full house? Because there was nowhere near a full house last year.
No, it's a good show. Do you know how big the stadium is tipped to be?
For Hobart?
Yeah.
I believe it's 25. Like I've got an article that I'm sure will say it somewhere.
Because you wouldn't want it to be much bigger than 25. You wouldn't have thought.
No.
So, because otherwise that's going to be an empty bowl for a long time, assuming it's ever built. But going back to your, the Team 19 expansion, do you reckon there's parallels between what we saw with the AFLW kind of expanding out to 18 teams very quickly, and that kind of, maybe the talent wasn't quite there for that to take place so quickly? They should have probably dripped a few teams in every year to build that talent pool up, outside of the fact that a lot of the women have to have other jobs to play the game. That's a different thing altogether, but that talent pool wasn't there. So is that your concern about having a 19th and 20th team? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, but that's very different. AFLW, I think, has struggled at times because you can't go from 0 to 18 in 5 years when you haven't had historical pathways. Now, there's been state leagues in women's footy. East Fremantle has one of the most successful state leagues women's programs in the country. I would say it's probably go as far as saying probably on the top 3 in terms of success. And that was built on a desire to make the pathway and invest in the club. Now, the AFL clubs were absolutely committed to their AFLW program. I'm not questioning that. But if you don't have the backing and the context historically and you haven't built those pathways, you're not going to succeed. This is a different issue.
Sure.
Because in terms of number of players, the number of players are there. You could add 85 players in right now if you wanted to, and make 2 teams right now, make it Team 19 and Team 20, and chuck them in tomorrow, make them play in round 4. But is that best for the league? You know,
don't give them ideas, Jesse. Don't give them ideas, because they'll bloody do it. You know they will.
Salary caps are going up.
Sure.
We're seeing that. We're seeing big money offers really start to ramp up.
Some massive ones.
You know, we are not far away from seeing $2 million a season for a football player. That's 12 months, if that, away. You know, the speculation's been that Harley Reid would be offered that if he was to move to Victoria. Tom DeConing got very close, apparently, with the St Kilda offer this week. Finn Callaghan was at 1.7.
Yeah, I mean, DeConing's was what, 12 mil over 7 years or something like that?
Yep.
Just huge.
We're getting close. What would Nick Dacos be a $2 million player if he was to renegotiate his contract right now? You know, I think you could even make the argument for someone like Sam Darcy. I feel, in terms of if you want to hitch your wagon to someone, you hitch it to Sam Darcy
100%.
right now. So we're not that far away. So then the question becomes talent attraction too. Can Tasmania reliably attract and retain talent? It's taken Gold Coast over a decade to be in a position of talent retention. They still lost Lukosius in the off-season. There's still very much a risk of losing players moving forward, but their academy system, after a decade of investment, has gotten them into the right position. GWS have had the same problems too. They still face the same problems. Fremantle face the same problems. West Coast, I mean, we can talk about Oscar Allen in a moment as well, Liam, if you'd like to, but sure. West Coast are facing these problems too right now. You know, they're arguably one of their most influential players and commodity-wise most valuable. You're not going a day without them being linked with a move over east to the same club as it stands.
Well, I mean, we can transition this on because it's kind of natural. But so if you've got these clubs that obviously we've spoken about St Kilda's Worcester, right? They've got a bit of extra cash in reserve. Are we going to see, do you think, the competition tend towards big players getting drawn to a single club? Kind of like you would get in your Premier Leagues, like with Man City or your Barcelona's, Real Madrid's in Spain. NBA is the same thing. Like it's just all money all the time. Like, do you feel like there's any danger with salary caps going up and, you know, teams are going to start financially, you know, giving themselves a buffer just to go, poof, here we go. Let's get Chad Warner in. Let's get Dacos. Let's get all these players and just create a mega team.
I do. And I think if you get a group of mates who want to play footy together, while there will always be the incentive to look after people financially, and I'm in no way suggesting that shouldn't happen. Yeah, I think, you know, we've seen players take pay cuts sporadically to keep themselves in the club. I think Nat Fyfe's a good example at Fremantle. Took a pay cut to extend his career at the club. But I think we're going to see a super team in the near future. It very may well be Hawthorn. I think Brisbane's a genuine chance of becoming one. There is absolute potential for a super team to evolve in the next 4 years. You could even make the argument, and this is the most anti-Jesse take I've had in this podcast, that Fremantle have done just that. I mean, if you look at the list profile, the number of players that have committed to re-signing, and probably the objective positioning of a well above average sub-elite that the players fall into. I mean, you've probably got at least one player in that elite category in Caleb Sarong, a couple of sub-elites, I would say, and then a multitude of very good players. You can make the argument, you know, we're going to see this on a bigger scale. Caps going up. I think we're seeing a real return back to the camaraderie and the mateship side of things, or certainly the more so that we see. You know, I feel like, you know, the Hawks are an easy example because they seem to be so affable and fun. I think Adelaide are really showing that on the field as well. They want to be there for each other. Mm-hmm. I think we're seeing a super team somewhere forming, and it'll be good list management because I don't think it's going to be one of the ones we necessarily expect. Hawthorn probably the most obvious candidate, but don't be surprised if it's a non-traditional club like North that can pull it off.
Yeah. Be interesting to see. I'm intrigued to see where the next few, like decade even, of footy goes, because we've got players signed till 2030, 2032. Like, we've got players signed for a long time. And 7 or 8 years, you know, to think about that is in itself kind of scary. Like, oh yeah, Andy Brayshaw playing in 2031. It just kind of boggles the mind. But
well, we only have 2 more full seasons after this one, Tasmania-less.
True.
So we're close to that. Realistically, Team 20 is not going to be far off their backs. I don't know how far. It's not going to be like it was with Gold Coast and GWS, where it was a year apart. But I think we'll see a Team 20 by 2035. Whether that's in Western Australia, whether that's elsewhere, I'm not sure. But I think we will see that, which is going to be really interesting when you talk about some of these clubs' contract situations. Which brings us to West Coast, because the story's kind of taken on life of its own. So Sam Mitchell was in Perth yesterday, which was Monday, and reportedly met with Oscar Allen for a coffee. Now, there's been conflicting reports as to whether he met with Harley Reid's management as well while he was here. I'm leaning towards that being less likely than likely based on some of the reporting around it. But the Oscar Allen meeting happened, and we know that happened. Liam, 2 questions for you.
Okay.
Question 1, if you're a West Coast supporter, are you put out by the optics of your captain, who did not have a very good game, off a derby loss, meeting with another club the day after? Question 2, are you willing to trade Oscar Allen to accelerate the rebuild?
I think on the back of number 1, I think we can speak about a hypothetical that we've created in our own head in relation to our captain and potentially going to Tasmania and how we feel about that, which is not overly positive.
No.
On the back of which is obviously well within their right to do that. That's their, they've got to do what's best for them.
I actually respect him for being honest and saying it.
Yeah, 100%. Optics is not great though. As an Eagles fan at the moment, you understand, or I hope you understand, where your team is currently at, and we saw it on Sunday as well. That they've got a long way to go, but they've already been doing this for a couple of years. So to lose Oscar, to trade him away for someone to accelerate that rebuild, it kind of makes you think about who could actually be that piece, because the rest of that scenario still isn't looking that great. You've got a few young players coming through, like Hoff had a pretty good game. Marek is doing pretty well. Like, you got a couple of kids who are doing it, but for the most part, a lot of that team and most of the older guard are letting him down. So accelerate the rebuild. I think we're past that. It's kind of getting to the point of starting it all over again, to be honest with you. And that could be a catalyst. Losing Oscar could be a catalyst, so long as they, get something for him that's going to actually assist them.
I think they should. I think they should move to Dill Allen, and it seems like they're doing that. And to be clear, it would be a free agent. It wouldn't be a trade because he's out of contract. So willing to let him walk is probably the better language that I should have used at the start of this. Yeah. The reality is, though, is that Oscar's not on eye-watering money, and honestly, probably isn't the player you need to get off your books right now to accelerate a rebuild. That player is Tim Kelly. And I have no issue saying that and calling, I guess, him out for that, because he is woefully out of form. Yeah. And he's not the captain of the club, which is fine, but he's a senior member of that dressing room. He came into the AFL as a mature age recruit. He came back to West Coast with a pretty clear mandate off his form in Geelong, and he's not lived up to that. And look, things don't work out at clubs for various reasons, and that's fine.
Sure.
But there's been players that haven't worked out that you can say, at least I can't fault their effort. But sure. I can fault Tim Kelly's effort.
Yeah. No, good shot. I think it's I don't think Tim is doing the Eagles any favours at the moment. Like, I understand, like, obviously on the back of his remarks about falling out of love with the game, that could still be playing on his mind, still weighing on his head.
I think it's fair to say, based on performance, that it is. Now, yeah. I'm not inside Tim Kelly's head, unless I'm in the front row at Optus passing on some feedback. But right now, I'm not in his head, and I can't, definitively say that is happening. But objectively, judging on performance, he's not at his best, which makes you wonder, is he carrying an injury? Is something else going on? Or does he just not want to be there? And I think all three are legitimate questions. If a West Coast supporter was to ask me, is this what you think? I'd probably say, yeah, these are your 3 scenarios for Tim Kelly right now.
Yeah. No, good shout. Good shout. Interesting to see where that all goes. But Jesse, we probably should talk about some games. It was a nice little discussion, that. I liked it a lot. It flowed. We started in Tassie. We finished in West Coast. We covered the whole country. Love to see it.
Sorry, Darwin. We'll come to you next week.
It's just the bottom half.
We should do a live show somewhere, but somewhere like funny.
Where would we do a live show?
Whitnum, I reckon.
Whitnum? Okay. What about Cooper Petey?
No, because I struggle to get jokes to land above ground, never mind below it. So at least give me a chance.
That's fair. All right, mate. Shall we? Anything else to cover before we jump into the games?
Yeah, we'll cover it organically. Absolute demolition day at Windy Hill. Caldwell hamstring injury.
Mm-hmm.
Edwards ACL.
Mm-hmm.
Edwards is on the shelf, and he's been Essendon's probably best forward, which isn't great for a team that's not kicking goals. And Caldwell He's certainly been their second best player. If not their best, I think you could make the argument he's giving Zach a run for his money at the moment.
Yeah.
So, yeah, big problems here for Essendon. With a thin list already, losing 2 best 22 players and 2 players that have been very influential so far. And they were also both, I think, fairly influential on Thursday night, Liam. What happened on Thursday night?
Oh, let's get the scores up here, Jesse. Let's have a quick squiz, shall we? All right. So we started round 3 at Marvel, like you just said. Essendon. Hey, Jesse. Essendon, 9-18-72, defeating Port Adelaide 8-12-60. We'll cover this more in just the tips later on. But I had the vibe.
No, we won't.
I had the vibe, Jesse. And look what happened. They bloody won. I don't know what it is about Port this year, man. What are they doing away from home? They just can't seem to get it right.
Did you watch this game?
I didn't watch it live, no.
Okay.
I didn't watch it live, no.
Because if you watch this game live, you may be entitled to financial compensation.
Oh. Okay.
Such was the offensively poor standard of football that both sides, especially Port, were dishing out on Thursday night. And, we said at the start of the season, we did our fixture review, why do Essendon have so many Thursday night games? And I said, it's ridiculous. They're not that good. They're probably not going to make finals this year. It's just, it's clogging primetime slots. Exhibit A, Your Honour. This was not a good game of football, and it should not have been in a primetime slot.
I guess, how do you tell? How do you know at the start of the season who's going to
You look at the fixture and see Essendon, you say, okay. I did that. Not that hard.
Yeah, they won though, Jesse. What are you talking about?
They won. Good for them.
Good for them.
They kicked 18 points.
They did, yeah.
It's a lot of points.
It's always a good, I did catch the mini for this one, and you always know that it's a great game when a lot of the highlights they show are the behinds. And unfortunately, that was kind of where this one sat. But outside of the jokes and the whatever, any key takeaways out of this one, Jesse, that really, really caught your attention? Obviously, Port and their inability to play in Melbourne this year is an issue.
Huge issue, but I think it runs deeper than that. It seems like they did not, or since I put out in the league when the Malthouse Buckley succession plan tried to go through, and it completely fell apart. Mm-hmm. Because it's clear this is not working. It's clear that Josh Carr is ready to take on senior coaching in the AFL, and it is clear that Ken Hinkley now has no real mandate to coach beyond 2024. He doesn't have a mandate to coach beyond 2025. He'd be out of a job. So it just makes things awkward. And the problem is now, if there's ever an issue with Port Adelaide this season, people are just going to point to the succession plan and say, this is the issue. And while I think that's part of it, looking at key players, pretty disappointing from Port. Wine's probably had his best game the season with 31. I thought Bergman looked really good as well. He's a great user of the ball by foot, Miles Bergman. Mm-hmm. Jace Bergwijn looks like he is continuing to improve. But Horne-Francis had a poor game, I felt, which is going to make things really difficult when you're relying on a star player like Horne-Francis to come in and be that impact guy. If he's not having a great game, I don't think Rosé is having a particularly good season. Never mind game on Thursday night. Travis Boak had an off night, but if we're relying on a 34-year-old Travis Boak to win us games, then I think the problems run deeper than a succession plan. Georgiades, to his credit, is looking lively.
He's looking better.
But the ruck situation for Port is just miserable between Sweet and Soldo. They're both getting game time. Neither are really grabbing the mantle of number one ruckman. They're both kind of number 1.5 ruckman. Mm. I think they have to commit to one and just move on, because I think both players have their limits, and playing both of them isn't really doing anyone any favours.
Yeah. Fair shout. And do you want to say anything nice about the Bombers before we move on? Because they did win this game after all.
They did. They kicked 18 points, which is a lot of points. Look, the fact is they're winning games with clear deficiencies in their forward line and also their transition into the forward line. But defensively, I thought they were really good. And unsurprising under Brad Scott that he can get teams over the line in scrappy games. I've maintained he's a top 5 coach in the league for a while now. That's the thing. Like, you look at some of the key players for Essendon. Merritt was very good, as he just about always is. Duursma had a big game against his old club, which is great for him. I thought Mason Redmond was quite solid too. Ridley is usually reliable from defence as well. So even with an off night from Nick Martin, they still managed to win. That's pretty good. I think you take that.
Yeah. I'll take it for sure. I'll take it all the way to the bank, my friend.
Oh, you've put him in the best. I actually didn't think he had that good of a game.
Well, there you go.
Sorry.
That's okay. Opinions be what they be. Should we move on, Jesse, to the next game of the round?
Yeah, let's talk Friday night footy. What a game this was, Liam.
Friday night footy. This was a cracker. So I did caught this with my pa, watched this with my dad. Friday, March 28th at Marvel. Carlton 11-9-75 remain winless against the Bulldogs 12-11-83. Now, this was like old school footy. This was really nice. This was a really fun game to watch. Both teams were gung ho trying to get this win, and unfortunately for Carlton, the Bulldogs were just that little bit too good. I'm impressed with the Bulldogs at the moment. They keep getting it done with a depleted list, which says a lot about how they're coached and says a lot about their work ethic, which I think is really a really important thing to bring up, especially when we see some of the other teams that at times don't feel like they want to be on the park. These two teams were going for it. Gung ho. Jesse, what were your thoughts on this game? Well, I take a swig.
You take a swig. I'll talk about the Dogs first. To Victor's go the spoils. Some key players I want to highlight out of this game. Sam Darcy could be anything. Tom Liberatore arguably having a career best season so far. James O'Donnell, good find, and I think there's potential here for him. And I honestly want to see him get weeks, and that probably means no Jamara for a while. But I want to see what he can do in the forward line, because I think there's a player there. He's got some instincts about him in that forward 50 and the ability to stand and take a mark above his head that I think is going to see him turn out to be a pretty handy player. Riley Sanders' use of the ball by foot is outstanding. We used to think of Bailey Dowell when we talk about disposals at the Dogs, but I think Sanders is an equally capable candidate in that regard. Matty Kennedy had a great game as well against his former side.
He did.
And that's got to hurt Carlton. And we'll talk about them now. Here's my issue with Carlton. Look at their goal scorers. Kemp got 5.
He did.
Young got 2. They kicked 11 goals. The other 4 goals came 3 from Curnow, to be expected, and 1 from Jesse Botlop. A small forward, probably to be expected for him to bob up for a goal. So we're talking we'll call him a, probably a lower half best 22 player. I think it's probably the nicest way to describe Brodie Kemp. I think he's probably unlikely to guarantee a spot every week if he doesn't kick 5 goals in a game. You've got him kicking 5, and you've got noted defender Lewis Young also playing against his former side, kicking 2 goals. So over half your goals have come from players that, through form or just being in their natural position, aren't going to be in that forward line. So if I'm looking around and I'm looking at some of the names in the forward line, I'm really concerned. Like, Francis Evans was a pretty good deal. I think they got him for nothing from Port. But, gee, you look at him compared to Matt Owies. What's he offering right now?
Yeah.
And Owies did not have a very good game on Sunday, but he still feels like he offers something. That's a real worry for me. Look at disposals for Carlton. De Koning topped it with 28. Hewitt with 27. Walsh with 26. Chera with 26. Hewitt, Walsh, Chera, are they particularly damaging ball users? Any of them?
No, I think they have. I look at Chera, and Chera is like one of those. He doesn't really do a lot with it. Like, he's always around, in and around what's going on. But then, yeah, I kind of see what you mean. Like, he doesn't really do anything with it. Walsh has it in him. Like, we've seen it before.
Walsh absolutely has it. But right now, is he damaging opposition teams with his ball use?
No. You can argue no. I think it was more. I think someone like Silvani was actually more impactful in this game. In his defense and then the rebound than anything else. I think Silvani had a really good game, actually.
Patrick Cripps, 5 kicks.
Yeah, Cripps has had a rough start to this season. He'll still poll 3 votes in every game, but he's had a rough start to this year. And you're right. I mean, you mentioned this last week. He looked gassed, like in the game last week.
He was absolutely knackered last week.
He didn't look like he was doing that much better this week. He went for a big old screamer and did his hip in. Like, that was they kind of said it all. Like he's trying to do almost too much for his team, and that is, I think, before the years passed with Cripps, he's had good support. Without that good support, I feel like he's trying to almost do too much now. And when he's trying to do too much, he's gassing himself out, and he's doing things that he probably shouldn't be doing, like going for screamers and landing on his back. He didn't get much air, old Cripps. He did not, and maybe he shouldn't try. So he's not. Yeah, he's not having a good start this year. It must be said.
No, he is not. Shall we move on to Saturday, Liam?
Go on. Let's move on to Saturday. Oh yes, this one. So round 3. Of course, it's still round 3. What round would it be otherwise, Liam? Your goose. March 29th.
It could be 4 if you count opening round.
That is true. I feel like I haven't heard that in like forever. Like last year, that was like every week. It was like, if you include opening round. Going to be a bit of nostalgia there, Jesse. Thank you very much. 29th of March at the MCG. Melbourne 8-14-62 going down to the Hot Suns 18-12, 120 in front of 24,506 at the G. Another 10-goal drubbing for the Demons. And I picked this. I picked the Suns to kind of repeat what they did against the Eagles. It's going to be interesting what happens when they come up against better opponents next week, which we'll cover later. But I tell you what, they're taking these lower table teams to task so far this season, and boy oh howdy, the Demons are in trouble. They're in trouble.
They are. And my big concern for Melbourne, so Touk Miller scores a goal 9 minutes into the third quarter to make it a 20-point game for the Suns. They've just conceded the goal. Harry Sharp kicks the goal, Touk Miller basically replies straight away. 20-point game, a third of the way through the third quarter. That's anyone's game.
Mm-hmm.
Melbourne have got work to do, but that game is absolutely within their remit to win. Full time, it's a 58-point game.
Carbon copy last week.
Melbourne are dropping their heads when things are getting too hard, and it's the sign of a team that is not connected. And it's a team that doesn't want to be there. Mm-hmm. You know, Harvey Langford had more of an impact on that game than Christian Petrarca. This is Langford's first season.
Mm-hmm.
Max Gawn, again, humbled in the ruck. This is a team that we're talking about winning a premiership less than 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Most of the pieces are still there. If you ask me to identify who played in the premiership for Melbourne, I'd probably say, in no real order, Oliver, Petrarca, Gawn, Lever, Viney. Oh, yeah, Jackson. Funny that. We've got him now. But, most of the key players are still there.
Mm.
May is there. Viney is there. Salem is there. Petrarca's there. Oliver's there. These are guys that we associate with a very good Melbourne team. Bailey Fritsch is there, although very much struggling for form. Van Rooyen, struggling for form. Most of these names. Harrison Petty, struggling for form. Their best players this season have arguably been Cade Chandler,
mm-hmm.
Harry Sharp, and off what we saw on the weekend, I think you throw in Harvey Langford in that too. I don't think you're naming Oliver, Petrarca, Gawn at least. You're talking either players who've elevated or players who weren't there last season.
What's going on then? What's going on? Is it just a case of like all these rumors and all this talk about the culture behind the scenes are actually coming to the fore and they are proving to be correct? Because like you just said, like you look at that list and you're like, well, nothing much has changed over the last 2 or 3 years. Personnel-wise,
yeah. I get the sense that noise wasn't nothing about the culture of Melbourne. There was something in that. But I also just think Melbourne are very much like Carlton, and they've got a pretty soft underbelly in terms of that 14th to 22nd player or 23rd player, if you count the sub, that's playing every week. I don't see the quality there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they're as bad as they're showing at the moment, but I was pretty happy to put them in the bottom kind of area in the table. I think it's time to rebuild if you're Melbourne. I know that's a shame. I think Melbourne fans will feel like they left something on the table with this team. So they got 21, and that's something that I think every fan wants is that premiership. But equally, you look at a team that was in the form they were from 21 to 23, they probably should have won more. I remember watching the Fremantle Nam game, as they were named at the time due to Sir Doug Nicholls' rate, at the GN22. they were invincible going into that game. I think they won 11 straight or 13, something like that. And I went to that game thinking, as long as we don't get flogged. But that is generally how good they were.
For all Freo fans going to the G. As long as we don't get flogged.
but this Melbourne team was no joke.
Yeah.
And you look back at 22, you look at, Geelong won the flag, Sydney in the grand final. For that to be the sentence and not to feature Melbourne anywhere in that breath feels like a missed opportunity. And right now, it's quite obvious this team's not going to win a premiership. It would take something, it would take an act of God almost for this team to win a premiership. And I don't know where you go from. I think you have to make the hard decisions on Oliver, Petrarca, Gawn, May as well.
Well, speaking of acts of God, from winning no games away from home up until about round 18 last year, the Suns have now got 4 in a row if you count the end of last year as well. They can't lose away from home now, apparently. They're looking pretty good.
And it's all to do with the way that Dimmer's got this team playing. They want to move, and they want to be in the face of opposition. They always seem to have a support player gut running.
Mm-hmm.
Hardwick has figured out the strengths of this team, the strengths of each individual, and has designed a game plan to suit his players, not asking his players to fit into his game plan.
Yep.
It's why Hardwick is still, in my view, the best coach in this competition. It's why when you look at some of the players in Richmond premierships, Higgins, Arts, you say those names, you think, they won premierships. Yeah, they won them under Damien Hardwick because Hardwick got the best out of every single player, and there'll be an exception in there somewhere, but he got the best out of his players at Richmond, and we're starting to see him now get the best out of his players on the Gold Coast. You knew this was going to be a project for Dimmer. You're not going into this environment and getting instant success. With the list they had, with the player rotation issues they've had, you're not going in there and getting instant results. But you're starting to see the fruits of the labour. Rouse, I think, having his career best season. Anderson's kicked on from last year. Noble's looking like he's finding his rhythm. Flanders is still a very valuable support in that midfield. Looking down the list as well, Ewan looks like he's stepping up into a good spot. Ben King.
Yeah.
Should have had 6, really.
Yeah.
Bullied Stephen May. Even veterans like Lockie Weller. I know David Swart is injured, but when you get these veteran presences in there, they're providing that pillar of stability and support for the young guys to go and take a risk.
Yeah.
You might make a mistake, but you're going to learn from it. And I think that's what's exciting about the Suns this year, is that Hardwick's game plan isn't about playing a role. It's not about who sets up zonally where. It's about this group gelling together and about him coaching his players to perform at their best, not to perform the system the best.
Hand on heart, when we started this year, I think we both had the Suns quite down the bottom of the ladder. And look, to be fair, that could still happen. But the way they're playing so far to start this year, I'm happy to admit that I was wrong, and I'm excited to see if they can finally make the finals. Wouldn't that be nice?
Likewise, I think I seriously understated the value of Damien Hardwick when I look at this Gold Coast. I think I was too focused on the list and not focused enough about the driver of that list.
We wouldn't be the only ones, that's for sure. Let's move on to the next game. The St Kilda Saints 2015-135 defeating Richmond 7-11-53 at Marvel in front of 41,147. 40,000. Well, I was going to say again, I had the wrong crowd last week, but close to 40,000 last week for the Saints, over 40,000 this week, and a big win. Obviously, the Tigers again. I think the first half, and this is kind of par for the course when you've got a team who is young, up and coming, building. First half, really competitive. Second half, no gas left in the tank. The better team just runs away with it. And I'm pretty sure that was the tale of these two halves in this particular game as well. What were your thoughts on this one, Jesse?
I used a footy cliche in our key takeaway. I'm going to use another one.
Okay.
Who said that leopards can't change spots? Because, Ross has changed his spots. Who would have thought that when you think of champagne footy in season 2025, you'd be thinking of the St Kilda side? But, they're scoring goals.
Yeah.
They're piling on goals. And I think Richmond, honestly, I think they did very well to be in it for the first half as they were. But once the floodgates started opening, Richmond don't have the maturity and the ability to correct a sinking ship consistently. They did it against Carlton. That was awesome. But I think that was benefit of like the ship sunk early and they had time to go and rectify it. Whereas the ship started sinking after half time, there's only 4 quarters. It makes things hard. But again, I think the problems that we talk about for Richmond, I'm going to have to talk about again. Taranto, I talk about Tim Kelly not anywhere near living up to his expectations at West. Because I think Taranto's in that exact same boat at Richmond. He has not lived up to the promise I think that Richmond fans were given by the signing of Tim Taranto. Ryan Mansell, 3-week suspension for his push. I think that was coming.
Mm-hmm.
I understand why people are cross, but people were warned. They were warned after the preseason. They were warned after opening round, and it happened. I don't really think you can be too upset by that.
Nope, not at all.
Seth Campbell is having one of the better seasons in the competition, and is a focal point for this Richmond attack in a way that I don't think anyone really expected him to be coming to the year. So it's good to see Seth really use his individual strengths and his nous for goal and get himself in the position. He's willing to put himself right in the thick of things, and he's getting the results for it. He's a clever footballer. I think he's a nice little pickup for the Tigers, a nice little prospect for them to keep working on. Look, outside of that, I think Short was solid for them. Lawler is going to take time.
Yeah.
And I think he has such an explosive debut game. Armstrong probably in the same boat too. But we've got to talk about the Saints because they did win very easily in the end. Mitch Owens, 4 goals, very good for him. Higgins continues his good form to start the season as well. Probably shouldn't undersell that, but Higgins is really humming at the moment for the Saints. And I almost get the sense he's their most valuable player.
Yeah.
Because when do you look at a St Kilda side where Higgins kicks 3 and they're not either losing very narrowly or winning? He seems to be so important to the fortunes of this team.
Well, I think also Higgins is like your Ballantyne. He's like your Papley. He's that small forward who is just is a bit of a niggler. He gets around. And he's in and around it, and he's always happy to just go hammer and tong at it. Doesn't care how small he is. He'll just go head on every single time. That's important for a footy team. It's very important.
You need heart and soul players.
You need heart and soul players, and I feel like a lot of the teams who are doing well this year are heart and soul teams across the board. And even if you've got 1 or 2 of those players who are doing that and lifting up the rest, even if the rest aren't following suit, if you've got 1 or 2 or aren't in that zone, you have 1 or 2 bringing them up. And I think going back to Melbourne real quick, that's who they don't have. They don't have that heart and soul player who was bringing the rest of the team up with them. But Higgins has definitely been that for the Saints this year. He always kind of has been, but I think he's standing out a lot more this year for sure. Shall we move on, Jesse? We've still got a few more games to go. We're running out of time. Let's go. Saturday.
Derby too.
We've still got that to go. Round 1. Blockbuster 1 of 2 on Saturday night at UTAS. The Hawks 10-16-76 defeating the Giants 9-10-64. Lights out at UTAS Stadium once again. Only 1 tower this time, not a whole lot, which is great. In front of actually quite a healthy crowd for UTAS, 14,021. Looked pretty packed from what I could see in the on the telly. What are your thoughts on this one, Jesse?
Wind,
yes.
So windy.
Well, this is the thing, right? The first quarter, the Giants had a 5-goal to 2 behind quarter. Second quarter, complete reverse, 2 behinds for the Giants, and then Hawks got the lead. I'm pretty sure going into halftime. And then post that, Jesse, correct me if I'm wrong, Hawks handled it a lot better after the halftime break and took it home. Yeah,
they really did. And they played in such a fashion that they learned from their mistakes in that first quarter. And that's a good footballing side. Now, we disagreed on this game in terms of who would win going in. And I said, just stick with this Hawthorn side in Tassie. And, they look like they'd never beaten Tasmania in that first quarter going into that breeze. That's probably understandable in the wind. But gee, they can course correct this Hawthorn side. And we've seen them course correct a couple of times now. Got shaky against Sydney in opening round. They probably didn't quite get out of the mud against Carlton as well as they would have liked, but ground out a result. And, fast forward to Saturday night, they beat the other form team of the competition in a tough game where they probably had every right to lose, given, they went in even. GWS were popular, had key ins like Jesse Hogan and Jake Stringer, and they still kept them to 9 goals. I think that's a pretty good return for Hawthorn, and I think people are reluctant to put Hawthorn as flag favourites because they're young and because they're a little bit different. And I get that because there is still that element of, that lack of steeliness within the team. But then you actually look at it, and is there?
I don't think it matters though. Even if there is, it doesn't matter because it's kind of not their brand. Their brand is kind of fun Hawthorn win, Hollywood Hawks, as we've always called them. It's kind of surpassed that steeliness. It's like they're going out there and just having a cracking time playing footy. And
but you look at some of the players that featured for them on the weekend. Bruce, obviously a veteran.
Yep.
Chol's been at 3 AFL clubs. Barras has, premiership experience or premiership team caliber experience at West Coast. Impey's a 200-game player. Gittivan's been in a premiership culture or around a premiership culture with Collingwood as well. Gunston, obviously, that doesn't need an introduction for any Hawthorn fans, certainly. Hardwick's got some good experience on his shoulders now, so does Carl Amon. They're not an inexperienced side. Or at least they've got an experienced enough spine to negate any concerns about the experience. When Warple comes back into the side, he's bringing, 6-7 seasons of AFL experience with him too. So I don't buy the narrative that Hawthorn can't be flag favourites because they're a flash in the pan or they're too kind of gung-ho. I think Hawthorn are your flag favourites. That's not to say they'll win the premiership, but I think right now they are clearly playing as the best side in the competition, and they are the form side of the competition.
Yeah, I mean 4-0 can't be wrong. I'm pretty sure the only team to play for so far. I could be wrong, but yeah, they keep winning. I think a good effort by the Giants, obviously in a losing effort. I think going down to UTAS and playing in those weather conditions. I think it was always going to be a coin toss, regardless.
Yeah, it always looks like it was going to be a couple of goals in it either way. I felt at least, and there was last year in this fixture too. I'm pretty sure. Yes,
but I'm not too worried for the Giants. I think they'll bounce back quite nicely. Anything else to add before we move on, Jesse?
Lockie Whitfield, all Australian season so far from him.
Absolutely. All right, the other game on Saturday night, the Cyclone game could have come up with something much better than that, Jesse, but I didn't.
Yes,
so here we are. 10-10-70 for the Lions, defeating the Cats 9-7. 61 in front of 27-966 at the Gabba. Jesse, again, I was not able to watch this one. God, it was a weird weekend. But go on, tell the lovely people what you saw.
Well, what we saw was two sides who can be in that premiership picture. And I said Hawthorn are probably flag favourites. I don't think you'd put these sides necessarily too far behind them. I know Geelong had a very weird game against St Kilda last week, but I think this probably is a pretty fair reflection of where Geelong are. They're right in and amongst the established top sides in the competition, and every side has an off week. Brisbane know how to control games, and they know the old Ross Lyonism of things are never as bad as they seem or as good as they seem. I think this, with the exception of the grand final, I think they've come from behind in something like 5 of their last 7 or 8 games of AFL footy. You talk about the finals last year and all the games that they've played in season 2025 so far, they've had to wrestle momentum back off another side, and often a pretty good side too. So they're doing a really stellar job of that at the moment, and they're doing it without a lot of massive impact from Lachie Neale, Jared Berry, Cam Rayner, like a lot of the impact players, and also I think the biggest thing of all, no Joe Danaher.
Yeah.
And they're still winning games. No one's beaten them yet.
No one's beaten them. It's Lachie seems to have been quite handily tagged out of most of the games so far, if I'm not mistaken. So,
but you know what? If I'm Chris Fagan, I'm happy with that.
Yeah.
Tag Lachie Neale out of the game. I've got Ashcroft, and Dunkley ready to go. And oh no, Ashcroft has 35. Better put someone on him. And now Lachie Neale's free. Yeah. I don't think you're going to see. I don't think even Justin Longmuir would deploy 2 taggers in a game, of football to play a specific role.
He'd contemplate it.
He would. He is a contemplator, that man. But no, I think this really goes to show that Brisbane have a Swiss Army knife of tools at their disposal to get themselves out of jail. Geelong, I think they'll be disappointed they didn't win the game, but I think they can take a lot of positives back down to Kardinia Park with them. They should be top 8. They can be top 4. Mm-hmm. And it wouldn't surprise me to see them in the 3rd week of finals, and who knows what can happen at that point with the side with its experience, coaching quality and player quality.
And a wet weather game too, which always is a bit of an X factor, which always makes it a bit more interesting. But no, I agree. I think Geelong, obviously they're 1 and 2 to start the season, but I don't think there's too many too many danger signs for them just yet. Let's move on to Sunday. Got a few more games to go. Sunday at Adelaide Oval, the Crows 17-12, 114, defeating the North Melbourne Kangaroos 12-6, 78. Spirited again by the Kangas. We always like seeing a spirited Kangaroo side, but I don't know. There's something about this Adelaide team this year, Jesse, that's just looking the goods. Something seems to have clicked. You know, they all seem to be up and about. They all seem to be there for each other. You know, it's nice to watch Adelaide play at the moment. And there's one or two teams every year that we love to watch play. And so far this season, Adelaide's been that for me. What are your thoughts?
Well, we have fun Hawthorn win for Hawthorn, which is a great feature of this podcast. I feel like we need a version for Adelaide too.
Okay. What are you thinking?
I don't know. I was hoping you'd make it up.
Oh, yeah, Adelaide.
No.
No? Okay.
That was actually terrifying. I feel like if people were listening to this on Amazon, hi Dave, they'd be terrified hearing that. Let's do what we're actually here to do and talk about football. Yeah, I think Adelaide are electric in season 2025. And for Matty Nicks to go from one of the most under pressure coaches going into 2025 to looking like he's really spent his off season fixing the Crows, I think he could come out of this as one of the most in-demand coaches in the competition if Adelaide can continue to progress. Now, there is a key caveat that I don't think they've played anyone particularly amazing so far this season. And I think we'll learn a lot about them this weekend when we get to that game in just the tips. But they are so aggressive moving that ball forward that I don't think you can undersell this game plan against good sides, because Adelaide, I think we see this with Gold Coast too, they're just causing pressure.
Yeah.
And teams that like to role play and be structured and set up and do things in a very specific steps, almost like they've got like a brief in front of them of step 1, do this, step 2, do that. That's not going to work against Adelaide side, I don't think, or Gold Coast, or a couple of other sides like Hawthorn in the competition who are just going for it.
Mm-hmm.
I said this at the start of the season, I think we're set for a bit of a renaissance in attacking football. Matty Nicks has read the tea leaves, and he's seen that this list can play aggressively. He's got the key forwards for it. He's got the players in midfield for it. He's got the leg speed for it. Trust my defenders and just go for it. And that's what we're seeing from Adelaide.
Yep, 100%. It's definitely the winning formula this year. That's for sure. Let's finish up, shall we, Jesse? Or did you want to say anything about North?
Yeah, I think they're in the right direction. And I don't think, if you look at this game objectively, yeah, it's not nice losing by 36 points, but they probably would have lost this game by 10 goals last year. And that one little move by Finn O'Sullivan where he danced through about 4 Crows players before getting his kick-off, I think that there's a lot to be excited about for North. I know I loosely floated them in our super team conversation earlier. I think if they can keep Sheasel, McKercher, LDU, O'Sullivan, Cherry, be afraid.
Yeah. Hard to argue. Let's finish up, Jesse, with the last round. Oh, God. Last game of the round.
Are you done with this podcast tonight, Liam?
Oh, my goodness gracious. I'm not, Jesse. I'm having a lot of fun. It's hard for me to get my words out sometimes.
Maybe we should start with the games next week.
Yeah, start with the games.
Get all of the words and then talk about fun things at the end.
We'll do all of the, we'll do it in reverse, the entire thing. We'll start with the last game of the round, work forward, and then we'll finish with the news. You love it.
Can we do that for Gather Round? Because if we're going to have stupid concepts on field, why not have stupid concepts on this podcast?
I'm all for it. The Western Derby at Optus Stadium, Eagles 10-8-68, defeated by the Dockers 15-16, 106 in front of 53,289. Look, finally, nice to see Freo get a win. I think we can both agree that every time we go into a derby, you're always nervous. I mean, I think we lost this same fixture last year by 70 points? Something stupid like that.
I don't think it was 70, but it was embarrassing regardless.
It was embarrassing. It was nice to see them play that running football that we know that they can play as a young, exciting side. That's what they did here. And it was nice to watch. And it worked. And you had, Sarong wreaking havoc through the middle. It was nice to see Murphy Reid showing what he can actually do around the ground as well. Like, he actually has a really good mind for football, that kid. So, each week that passes by, I'm actually okay keeping him around in the team just to see him develop and see him come through.
Okay, Liam, you said Murphy Reid with so much anger. And I thought that's directed at a different Reid. So what did Archer do that really made you cross?
No, I said Murphy Reid with anger because I got it wrong last time. So I was making sure I was being very direct with getting it correct. Bruce Dudley, how fun was he? It was nice to see him get 2 goals. He actually looked like that small forward that we've kind of been missing this year, to be honest with you. He actually looked like he fit in very well for a small fella. What's he, 3 centimeters taller than you, Jesse? That's a footy player. We were making jokes earlier this year about you being in the forward line. It's not far off being true. Love that.
I'm not a hard man to reach, Justin. Just reply to my emails.
No, it was lovely to see him. Look, I think we spoke about Shea as well. Look, I think we both think he's one key moment away from unlocking himself at Freo. He's giving it a crack. It's not like he's not trying, but he's obviously going to garner a lot of attention because he's a superstar, and he's probably taking a bit too long to make those decisions in the forward 50. He's looking okay through the middle, but yeah, I think there's going to be one game where he just breaks out and becomes the superstar we know he is. Look, Tracy, fantastic again. Great to see him finally kick a few goals as well. That's going to do wonders for his confidence.
What happens when you honour a key forward's lead and actually kick it to him?
Well, this is the thing.
And you actually put a lace out on his chest as opposed to 80 metres in the air and hope for the best.
This is the thing. He's a elite leader, and no one ever gives it to him. It's just like, bomb along. Someone will grab it. And granted, that worked a couple of times. I know, Jacko took one in the square off a big bomb, which was nice to see. But yeah, it's just nice, Jesse, to have to come and speak about Freo and be positive for once. What are your thoughts?
Well, you're going to yell at me for time, but there's actually a few things I want to go through about this game. So you just
come on, hurry up
with it. Editor boy. We'll talk about West Coast first. The Ryan Marriott experiment, switching him to defence, is working. Liam Baker looks like a heart and soul player that I think West Coast will really enjoy having in that 23 moving forward. Dwar's working in that direction too. McGovern is still competing as if it was 2018. Like, you wouldn't know that it's not 2018 watching Jeremy McGovern play because you talk about Murphy Reid's football brain. I don't think there's many better in the competition than McGovern. He understands the game defensively in a way that few others will. I thought Jimby had a really solid game too, playing undersized key on Tracy and Demis at various points. I think it's almost a waste for a player like him, but he fills the role so well. I understand why he's there. Archer Reid was actively giving Alex Pearce problems, which is a big bit of excitement for West Coast. I think moving forward, there's a player in there. Negatives for West Coast, there's a few here. Actually, one more positive. I think Bailey Williams battled pretty manfully against Jackson and Voss in the ruck. He's probably not designed as number one ruckman, Williams, but I think he did a pretty solid job, all things considered.
One thing quickly on Voss. That kid could mark. That kid could take a very good mark. If he just gets his goal kicking right, he could be dangerous.
I think it's the curse of number 20.
Oh, you reckon so? Oh, yeah, the Tabs, yeah. Fair enough.
Give it to someone else.
Who was 20 before Tabs? Wasn't J-Lo 20?
Yeah, he was too. Oh, retire the number, but not as like an honour thing. It's like a misery thing. Negatives for West Coast. Tim Kelly. I don't know what more you can really say. He's not performing. Oscar Allen was poor. I'm going to say Jamie Cripps being their most dangerous forward is a negative because Jamie Cripps is quite old.
Yeah, but Cripps gets the ball anywhere, especially in the pocket or on the boundary line. He's put that thing through.
It's almost automatic, yeah.
Yeah, it's all automatic.
He's very good at that.
Very good.
Injuries as well. Gov injured, missing time. No Jake Warden. I actually said this to the dear lady I was sitting next to, who's been a West Coast fan all her life, and she's been around longer than West Coast. Let's put it that way. I made that point to her. I said, Waterman makes this game very different, and I stand by that. I think you look at this, the way West Coast were playing, they needed Waterman out there.
Yeah.
I'm going to save Harley Reid for the very end because I want to tie that point into this one. You said before it was nice to see Fremantle moving the ball a bit more. I agree, but I have a key caveat.
But, yeah, there's always a but with you, Jesse.
They moved the ball because West Coast were turning over the ball a lot more than average AFL side would be, and it's really stupid to kick the ball backwards when you've got an open field right in front of you and you can just go. Now, Ryan did try a couple more aggressive kicks from marking situations. O'Driscoll really likes to move that ball, but I don't think the game plan has changed. I get the sense that this was without punching down. I don't want this to be a punch down on West Coast, but I don't think West Coast are a very good team at the moment. And when you play Team A, being Fremantle's 23, against Team B, being West Coast 23, and take out the rivalry element, this result is just about expected. And you could even make the argument, probably should have been more.
Yeah.
But I don't think the game plan has actually changed. I just think it was a case of, I've now got the ball as an absolute freebie. Let me run with it. Negatives for Fremantle, I don't know what we're actually doing with Heath Chapman. I don't think Longmire actually knows what to do with him either, and that's a worry because I think he has a lot of strengths that just aren't being honoured at the moment. They seem to be willing to push him hard at the ground. Bailey Banfield on the wing. Please never do that again. That was offensive in many ways. We've got to get Geordie Clark some help because the clamp on Clark at the moment from other teams is effective in stopping some of that ball movement. I'm very happy to criticise our game plan, but Clark being unable to get free is definitely impeding the faster elements of our game. And against good sides, we can't rely on, frankly, bizarre turnovers from 20-metre passes to go and get the ball back. Negatives also Voss's goal kicking. He got there in the end, but gee, it was a huge, oh no, where's this going? Whenever he was marking the ball and clunking them very well.
Yes.
Positives, and I know time, but let's give the game the attention it deserves.
Which is why it's good. This is the last game of the round for the second week in a row. Third time next week as well.
Goodness save Sunday at 3:10. Positives, Dudley.
Yeah.
So good to see.
Yeah.
You mentioned that. Actually, I'll try to skip the ones that you mentioned and kind of come up with my own. I thought Carl Warner, despite having some of the worst disposal I've ever seen, played really well as an undersized defender, much like Jinby for West Coast. I saw a couple of times him competing as like Jack Williams and Oscar Allen as an undersized and winning the contest. I'm not sure with Warner. I don't know, but he's got utility as an undersized defender, and I think if you lose a player like Luke Ryan, he's going to have to take that spot as his ability to play undersized as a defender. I know people seem to really have this thing about Michael Frederick and really just, for whatever reason, do not like him, and I'm sure there's no specific reason behind that. But he is one of our most reliable goal kickers in difficult game situations. When Freddie got that ball outside 50 in the third quarter, the game's still relatively in the balance. He had to kick that goal, and he absolutely flushed it. And he has a pretty consistent track record of doing just that. I think Erasmus getting on ball time, that was nice to see. And I think he acquitted himself really well. Again, he's not a half-forward flanker. I know he's there out of necessity because our midfield is really good. They used him in the midfield finally. Otherwise, there's no point playing him because that's what Neil Erasmus is. He's a midfielder. You need to play him in that position. And O'Driscoll is my second last positive. I think he is really starting to come of age as a footballer, and I'm excited to see what he can do in season 2025. You know who my third best on ground was? He's not in our list. I'd actually bumped Tracy for him.
Okay.
And that sounds harsh. I put Matty Johnson in our best 3 on ground.
Yeah.
You know what? Not only did he disrupt Harley Reid, he disrupted Andrew McQualter.
Yeah.
Because McQualter was forced into a change that completely changed West Coast centre bounce dynamic. For those who didn't watch the game, Johnson was given a tagging role on Reid. The first time I've seen him deployed as a tagger in a traditional sense, or at least a run with clamping effort. And he passed with flying colours. By the time they separated, it was, I think, 11 touches apiece at 3/4 time. Johnson stayed in the guts. Reid went to half back. Johnson finished with 17, Reid with 15. Johnson also got the goal as well. That was really nice. Harley got a very nice mark and a goal too, which was nice for him. But that goal really only happened because Johnson was forced to go and play one back in defence because we'd lost the ball on a poor turnover, and Reid was allowed to go with Murphy Reid and move forward.
Yep.
It happens, and it happens with taggers. Like, you're going to have those moments, but that was the moment that Harley Reid was dangerous on the field, was when Matty Johnson was otherwise occupied.
Yeah. Well, let's finish off with this. We'll keep this to like a short little bit each in relation to Harley, because I think this was a bit of the turning point game for him in the sense that it's now or never with him. He needs to turn it around. He needs to turn it around. He is too focused on starting fights and being a bit of a menace, but not in a good way. He needs to mature. And I heard a lot of people are very, I get it, empathetic towards him from what he had last year. But I'm sorry, you can't just keep saying he's getting better, he's getting better, he's getting better. We're now 3 games into this season for the Eagles, and he doesn't seem like he's trying to change anything. He's more focused on just getting under people's skin than he is playing footy, which is he's obviously a superstar. He's obviously got all the pieces there. He wouldn't have been a number 1 pick if he didn't. But I don't know. I just feel like when you're 30, 40 points down, your focus shouldn't be, let's get under Sarong's skin. Like, you're not in that position, mate. Play footy. You're good at it, but you're not being good at it. He's got to sort it out. Your thoughts, Jesse?
Well, I think the divide in the West Coast fan base between Harley is our saviour, or Harley is a player we must keep, to I've had enough, get rid of him. That port starboard deck is moving every week, and it's only shifting towards get rid of him. And watching the game live on Sunday from a admittedly very good seats that I was very privileged to be in, I was watching Harley a fair bit. He's an attraction player, and even though I'm there to watch my team, I find myself watching him. And the one thing I'm always saying about Harley isn't his nice Puma boots, isn't his luscious blonde hair. It's the fact his mouth's moving.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem to stop moving. And I know the camera's not going to catch it all the time, but Harley's always got something to say. To Geordie Clark, to Matty Johnson, to Caleb Sarong. There's always something to say with Harley Reid. Here's what I have to say on Harley Reid. I don't think he wants to be in Perth. But I think there's a lot better ways to go about it than this. It's not going to be nice for Harley Reid if he does go at the end of this season, and I think that is becoming a bigger possibility by the week, when he has to come back here, and if the AFL has any sense of theatre, they'll do it round 1 in 2026, but he has to come back to this crowd, the crowd that backed him, the crowd that got behind him, that have made him, I think, the fan base as welcome as they possibly could have. They cheer for Harley in a way that they cheer for Judd and Cousins.
They were throwing the birds up in solidarity at the game. Everyone had the fingers out in the crowd when to show him love from his display last week.
But this is the problem. The patterns of behaviour aren't improving, and I don't think McQualter, and this is not a criticism of McQualter, I don't think McQualter's got the tools to deal with this, and that is absolutely not a criticism of him as a coach. But I think he's been given a bit of a raw deal with this. Now, it seems like there's an attraction to Harley Reid, apparently, from players over East that want to come and play with him. But not only is he struggling with discipline, he's also struggling for form. I mean, he was better last year. He was comfortably better last year. He had 11 kicks, 15 touches, a goal, a couple of marks. That's all. That's okay. And I think you got to be careful with second-year players, because you don't want to be too kind of overtly harsh when you're talking on senior players, because it can get a little bit kind of nasty. But his disposal isn't that great, and we saw a couple of times him just belting the ball. He had one shot for goal that he just belted as high as he could. I was like, is that Blake Acres? And then another one where he turned over a 20-meter pass because he actually wasn't looking where he was kicking. He's like, I know there's a yellow jumper player over there somewhere.
Oh, yeah, we could keep talking about Harley. I think he's got a lot to turn around for the remainder of the season. We could keep going, but as is tradition, we always spend about 5 times longer talking about the Freo game than we do any other. But that's okay, Jesse. That's okay. It's at the end.
It's our club.
It's our club.
And we're allowed to.
I think it's really good that we talk about the teams. We're not just a Freo podcast. We try and get across the board. But when it comes to talking about our boys, we're going to put a bit more effort in. That's just how it's going to be.
You've got to allow us some form of liberty on there.
A little bit.
And despite apparently growing public belief, I actually am a Fremantle fan.
That's true. That's true. All right, Jesse, that'll finish us up for this week. Send the lovely people home.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning into the Centimetre Perfect AFL podcast. Please like, share, subscribe if you're on YouTube. If you're on your preferred podcasting platform, a review is much appreciated, especially if it's 5 stars. But the best way you can help out the show, if you do enjoy us, is word of mouth. So tell your friends, tell your neighbours, tell the lovely old lady you sit next to at the next Western Derby. I listen to a really good footy podcast. If she says, what's that? Just help her and get Spotify on her phone. Or if Dave's around, get Amazon. Until next week, it's been a pleasure. We'll speak to you soon on the 70 Minute Perfect AFL podcast.
Bye, everybody.